think is actually a benefit to people browsing, because it gives you the ability to see exactly what we just did on Rose Chang's design, which is one iteration and one collection of atoms that form, be it a pattern or a page or whatever it may be, that serves a specific purpose. UI Garage is similar. Patterns is the site that that GIF was from a couple slides ago. And then UI Patterns, I think, stands out from the others in that there's actual documentation on the patterns that you see there. And so there's best practices or just general explanation of exactly why the pattern looks the way it does. I'm gonna take a little water break and then I'll explain that. I'll be providing the link to this presentation, and all of these are clickable links. So look through it. In case you forgot anything I said, you'll be able to see that. In case you want to visit these sites, you'll be able to do that as well. All right, so on to Figma. Components in Figma are, I guess you would say, a collection of atoms. But if we were to talk in specifically Figma terms, they're a collection of objects that combine to form a single element. And once you create a component, it is both editable and reusable, and above all things, it's scalable. So you can multiply that component, create different iterations of it, different variants of it, which we'll get into later. But just as a small example, these objects, blank, is it blank? It might be white fill in the background. Anyway, this pill shape with a black stroke around it, this green bit, this gray bit, and this white bit all combine to form this check toggle. And if this were working properly, it would start off in the inactive state and I'd be able to toggle it to the active state. But life isn't perfect, so there you have it. I might be able to go back and show the pre-presentation look of it, but move on. Components are stored within asset libraries, and you can find the assets menu between layers in the left panel and pages. And typically when you do create a component, it goes from this sort of empty state where it tells you how to do the thing to this state where each and every page within your document is listed. And within those pages, you have like a sort of toggle drop down that shows you each and every component that exists within said page, right? So this is from another project that I worked on with Taylor Rue, or as part of Taylor Rue, I would say, more accurately. And if I were to hit dashboard here, I would get visual representations, typically in like a 2-column grid of all the components that have been used within that project. You can start to see how, as you're moving across different pages of your design, you can simply pull from other pages or copy from other pages to bring those components over into, be it a new page, or, you know, say I want something from the design system in the dashboard, I can go here and do that. The other thing to note here is libraries. So within Figma, you can nest your current pages within a project, or sorry, not current pages, current file within a project. And as long as things are within the same project, they're using the same library. And I think depending on whether or not you're part of several projects, you can also pull from other project libraries. I'm not 100% sure on that. But again, you can see how expansive and, again, like modular, reusable, convenient all of this gets very quickly. All right, so back to variants. This is the little thing that I was talking about before that didn't show up, but variants allow for better library management. And so instead of having, say, these two as separate components within that library menu, a variant will allow you to condense them into one and then switch between them on the fly. Right, so I have here switching between states of the same object. So each state is denoted by any number of properties. As far as I know, you can have an infinite number of properties, and any combination of those properties will give you its own actual component, or variant, I guess you call it. Right, so for this, there's only one property for each, and there's two states for those properties, disabled and enabled. Disabled gives you this, enabled gives you that. Where it gets a little more complicated is when you have interactivity. And of course, there's no wrong way to use Figma. So, I mean, I could create a variant of, say, images that has this hand sanitizer as one image, this as another, and any number of images of objects denoted by several different properties. But for the sake of simplicity and for keeping things within like design and UX, I'll do buttons here. So interactive components utilize variants to make prototyping a little bit more, as is in the name, interactive. And so for start here, you'll see that I have a default state, a hover state, and a press state. And for stop, I have the same. So property number one of this component here is, I believe, primary. Yes, I called it primary. And property number two is secondary. So that encompasses these three. And then, or sorry, no, state number two of property one is secondary. Property two has to do with whether or not it's default, hover, or pressed, right? And so when prototyping, I can actually have those reflect on the buttons themselves, as opposed to making several different screens that are triggered by whatever interaction it might be, right? For whatever reason, when I press, it goes to the next slide instead of giving me the button that I want. But perfect time for us to actually get into the workshop. I'm going to paste a link into chat. So if you're rocking a dual screen setup, you can follow along on your own. And if not, totally fine. You can just watch or follow along later on. So that link will bring you to this page. And since this file is view only, what you might want to do is hit duplicate here to get your own file. And then from there, we'll move into the workspace section. I'm actually going to change the color of this. But yeah, I'll give everybody a brief minute to get there and maybe start showing some of the stuff that made this presentation possible. So this is the state I was talking about before. And oh, something I forgot to mention. So all of these images, this here, that purple outline denotes that it's a component, right? So there's a master component within my asset management page that has the credit at the bottom with auto layout such that it sticks to that bottom right-hand corner. And since that's the master component, say if I wreck my presentation and let's just change the orientation to the middle, right? Then that cascades down to all the other, you call them iterations of the component. But if I bold this, it doesn't affect anything else. So many ways in which you can have changes cascade down to, have changes that matter cascade down to child objects of the parent component or iterations of the parent component. But also many ways in which if you affect those children of the main component, so many different names for these things, it's non-destructive. And I guess one last thing I'll say is that if you want to instance, that's what it's called. If you want to bring an instance back to its original state, you can hit reset all overrides, and then it'll become spitting image of the main component. There's a ton of other things you can do as well, like detaching the instance such that it's no longer affected by the main component. But anyway, I've gone on long enough. I think we're all in here, right? Cool. All right, so today in the workshop, we're going to be building a table, I hope, and also a tooltip. So
Mac,
I think one of the...
You're under workspace, right? Not the cover.
Yep, that's correct. Is anyone still hanging out in cover? I see you, Jenny. Jenny, if you could jump down to workspace, you'll see where all the action is. So for this workshop, these are all going to be our, well, some of them are atoms, some of them aren't, but we're going to make, let's see, I'm not seeing the file in my drafts, even though I'm duplicating the file. So in my experience, when you duplicate, you should get the ability to open. Yeah, so Figma should ask you or prompt you to open right here. And if not, you can go into your drafts and use the search bar to search for, let's see, I'm going to type it in chat. Search for workshop if you can. Yeah, so it'll prompt you to do that. And if not, you can probably search within your drafts to find it. I hope that helps. But I guess I'll say one of the things that prompted the creation of this workshop was actually me building a responsive table for another project that I worked on as part of the Taylor Collective. So I'm hoping to recreate that magic here without any hiccups. We'll see. All right, so I think the first and most important thing in building a table specifically is to have all of your components of roughly the same size, if not exactly the same size. You'll see this divider here, which should be labeled divider, is the same width as the cell background, right? Text box, same, layer order's wrong, same height and width of the background. And what that's going to help us do is get the, is it the same width? No, we have 180 and 181. It's going to help us make sure that this is responsive and that everything scales properly as things move. Things actually very much off in size, so let's fix that. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to set this to centered. And this group will now be like our single cell, right? So I'll group it, call it single cell, move my mouse so it's not blocking the text. And then within single cell, as you select each and every component, constraints will start to become important. I'm waiting for my constraints to show up. They are not there. Let me see. Maybe if I auto layout it, start to get it. All right, so we've turned the single cell into auto layout using shortcut of Shift A, which should be the same if you're on Mac OS. And now within that, we can start setting constraints. So I want the divider to fill the container widthwise, but retain its height so that once this scales, we're getting the divider. See, now this is not what I want. We're getting the divider to move widthwise without actually changing position lengthwise. Now, what I was looking for before in constraints was to have it actually, how would you say, have it stick to the bottom of the container. But for some reason, I'm not getting those constraints here. So let me see if I can fix that. I'm going to drag that single cell into this frame. Relieve this thing of its status as a frame. So single cell is no longer an auto layout. You can do that both by going to this minus button on auto layout or hitting Control Alt G or Command Alt G if you're Command Option G if you're on Mac. All right, so now we have some level of constraints because we are in a larger frame. Divider, not deliver. I renamed the wrong thing. All right, so this is still named divider. Nothing's different there. I'm going to remove auto layout once again. And now that this is within a frame, I actually should be able to do it outside of this. Sorry, y'all, remember, baby's first workshop. All right, so now that this is within a frame, we can actually set constraints. And what I want from this divider is for it to stay at the bottom as far as its vertical constraint goes, and for it to stick to the left and right sides of the frame, right? So now as we move this frame out of the nested frame, because we don't need that, and then resize single cell, it sticks to the bottom and, also sticks to the sides. Contents, I think we would want, I'm not sure we would want there, maybe left and top. Essentially, the constraints are deciding how an object reacts to any type of resizing. And so I think we would want the contents to stay at the top. Let's do that. We won't agonize over the decision for too long. All right, so we have our single cell, and what we are now going to do with that is turn it into a component. Scary thing. So the shortcut for turning something into a component is Control-Alt-K, or I think Command-Option-K if you're on Mac. And again, this will be single cell. And since we have two different types of cell content here, both just text content, let's actually rename that text content. And how would you call this, a tag content? We'll create a variant for that. But before we do that, something we also want to do to make sure that this is responsive is actually come here to the parent component itself, turn on auto layout, again, Shift A, and make sure that it's hugging contents, right? So then within that, we want the text content to fill our container horizontally. And then let's say hug contents vertically, okay? Or maybe fill container vertically. Let's do fill container.
What's the difference there, Matt?
Good question. So both dictate exactly how the text box itself is resized, but for fill container, it's going to change the size of that container slash text object, text box, as the single cell frame changes size. Whereas for hug contents, it'll only change size as you continue typing into it, right? One thing to note is that if you select hug contents and then edit the object in the direction that you changed that constraint in, it'll then convert it to fixed height. Anyhow, I'm not sure why it's not doing exactly that, but changing something outside of either fill container or hug contents will often make a component or frame or whatever it may be change its resizing behavior because it no longer fits the parameter that you've given it. See, now somehow that happened to our divider and it had gone from fill container to fixed height. But we're back. We have that behavior back. All right, so now that all that's done and all our confusion is out of the way, or at least mine, or at least some of it, not all of it, we will start making variants. So I'm going to keep the master component named single cell, and variant 2 will be called, let's say, tag contents, whereas variant 1 we'll call text contents. Okay. And the biggest difference there will be that our tag will actually exist in tag contents. right? So for the sake of this, we're going to hide text content. We are going to make sure that tag content is behaving as it should, which it isn't. Trying to think here. Maybe this is still fixed container, fill container. Let me redo putting this in. We're going to hide this. And because of auto layout, you'll see that the divider moves up. Okay, I know exactly what's going on. So instead of having this as hug contents, we're going to change it to fixed width and fixed height. And if I can, actually going to remove it from the frame, which you can do with, I'm gonna have to remake the box, but I'm gonna remove it from the frame so that we can control the size of the actual rectangle that contains the tag. Because again, what we want is for it to span the entire width of this here. I'm gonna move my cat because he wants to be on my lap. Say hello. Don't take my earbud out. All right. So what we'll want to do is actually create frame the size of this box, so 180 by 64, and have that be our frame for the tag. Okay, and then within that, this is 127 by 43. I'm going to remove this from its frame, create one of 127 by 43. Then give it the same stroke, not 5, but 3, maybe 2. Who's good? We'll round the corners. Make sure these are aligned. And then also give this a fill, just so it can stand out against the white background. All right, so now that we have all of those, we'll group them and then drag them into this tag frame. Remove the fill from this tag frame, which is actually its own rectangle. I did not realize. All right, and now we should be good to bring this in here. Fingers crossed. Perfect. Okay, so I think it'll be helpful for everyone to go back over the recording of this, because I'll say that I recruited the help of a tutor to figure out exactly what content I should put into this workshop. And in preparation for actually writing the workshop, I had to review that video. So definitely know that this is not something that comes super easily, as you can probably see. And again, practice makes perfect. So we'll want the frame that we just made, which is not the actual tag itself, but the frame that contains it, to fill our container. And let's say we do that for both the width and the height. Then we'll make sure that as it fills, the tag itself, rename that tag, is aligned to the center. And then dictate the behavior for the rectangle as well. Okay, so all of that is aligned to the center. So as this full cell scales, both horizontally and vertically, our tag stays put in the center and is not changed in terms of size at all. Okay, I think that might be the hardest part of making the tables. So let's move on to the more fun part. So typically when you are working with, or not working with, I would say oftentimes when I see tables nowadays, there's not usually a divider at the bottom. Instead, what they'll have is two separate fill colors. So if we want to allow for that option as well, what we'll do is duplicate this, change the fill color, say to that same blue, but like a little bit lighter, just so the eye has some contrast between the two, but not too much. Maybe a gray color, blue color, gray color. Let's do a blue color. And then in order to differentiate these two sets from each other, what we can then do is go into the properties and add a property. And like I said, there can be an unlimited number of properties. So today we'll try and stick with 2. I'll do text. And then for number 1, we'll change this to white BG. All right, and so for all of these, I'm going to change that property 1 to white BG. For this, I'm going to change property 2. I already did that. So change this to text. And then you can select multiple tags, as you probably saw me do before, and change one or many properties all at once. Okay, so none of these should overlap now. White, oh no, they do overlap because I did not put in blue BG, but we'll do that now. Easy to fix. Easy to fix as long as I'm doing the right thing. Now we got it. Easy to fix, blue BG. Okay, cool, we're good. So say we want just one level of differentiation. So not the dividers, but just that color. We can go in and hide the dividers. And since they're there, it allows for us to, make up our minds at a later date as to which we want without editing destructively and, erasing the work that we've done. But from there, we'll start building columns. So I'll drag one bit of text content out and another here. So, we have our 2 different types of cells, and we'll start building the column from here. I'll duplicate them, throw them together, and at any point, you can select them all, hit Shift A again to do auto layout, or simply hit the auto layout button over here, which would be a plus, had I not hit it before. And from there, you can just start duplicating within. All right, so I can take all 4 of these, duplicate them again. And when you duplicate within an auto layout, typically it'll bump everything down 1 unit. So instead of having all four components stack on top of their duplicates, it'll be like one clone, the next clone, the next clone. But if we want to fix that, we can either drag these within the layers or hit Control Shift and then close bracket or open bracket to move them to the bottom or the top of the layer stack. Or if you don't want to do them all at once, you can hit just Control and open bracket or close bracket to move them one by one. I'm big on shortcuts. I come from Photoshop and the entire Adobe suite, so those saved my life many, many times. All right, let's have those as columns. And now the header that we made before is going to come into play. So we're going to drag our header into this column, if I can find it again. Here we go. Right. And by default, this is kind of a weird thing about Figma that I don't fully understand, but when something is in auto layout, the layer order is reversed. So although our header is at the bottom of the stack, it shows up at the top of the layers. So we'll want to march it up by marching it down, if that makes sense. And what I'll do is apply auto layout to the header just to give it some padding without changing too much about the text itself. Have it as fill container so that if this column changes width, I don't like that. If the column changes width, then so does the header. And you'll see that once I change the width of the entire column, that for now it's because it's a copy, these cells did not change size. I'm of the opinion that that behavior should have carried over from the components, but it's not something that is unfixable. So I'll select them all, hit fill container once again. For now, we'll give them fixed height. But from here, you can see that we're able to resize them. And what I'm realizing now is that text content should probably stay anchored to the left. So we'll go back and do that. So for both of these, I'll go in and have the text content as its own auto layout group. Size it to the container, hit fill container in both directions, but have it aligned to the top left and give it a padding of, let's say, 16 from the left and like 12 from the top. I'll do the same here. Fill that out, fill container, 16 and 12. And so for our header, we can do something similar just to make sure that the spacing looks correct. So 16 there. And we could mimic that top margin if we wanted to, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. So let's see if this works. Perfect, right? One thing it doesn't do is resize the how do you say, the cells vertically. But something that we could do to fix that is, I actually don't know if we want to fix that. Let's not, because that behavior is not what I commonly see with columns. All right, cool. So from here, if we wanted to make this into a true table, we would have several columns. It means we're dealing with this and this, and this, and let's say this is a contact column. So we'll have first name, last name, phone number, address, and then since we want to use our tags, also tags. But you'll see that we don't actually have our tags in here. So we'll fix that by dragging these guys out, hitting auto layout on them, reducing the margin to 0. So they're stacked right on top of each other. And then name, duplicate business we had spoken about before. First 2, then 4. For some reason, this is harder than it was before. I'm not sure what happened between now and then. All right. I'll just replace this one here in this tags column. Right, and from there, we can even throw all of these into their own auto layout and have it on clip content, such that if we want to have fewer or more columns for each, or sorry, rows for each, we can just resize that table. And just the same, if we want longer names, we can resize each individual column. If we want more tags, and change the behavior of the tags as we should have done before to fill container. And I think those actually make sense centered, but if not, if we don't want that, then we can come back into the tag frame, set it to auto layout, and have the same spacing as before. So tag frame, auto layout, margin of 16, and we'll keep it by 9 because actually we'll do this. We'll have it centered. No, we won't. We'll choose the same spacing as the other. Y'all are getting a very direct glimpse into my design process. It's me jumping in 5,000 different directions at once. I think this is actually the most intimate look at my design process that Tu and Kim have had as well. So welcome. Welcome. All right, so we'll do 12 there. 12 there as well. And that should, yes, that should reflect on these. Right, so if we have multiple tags in here, we have multiple tags in here. For some reason, it's moving it outside of the instance. I'm not fully sure why that is. And not allowing me to edit this instance. So there are limitations to instances or children of components. There are times at which you can only edit them in certain states, but say if I were to detach the instance, I would then be able to add more tags, have them move that way. And typically, if you're designing with overrides or detached instances, you would keep the or maybe not typically, but I think it's a good practice to keep that master component nearby. I've actually seen someone set their work up in such a way that they have, say, all of these in one area and then a large space next to it with, let's say, white fill, where they have every possible iteration of this table. So if anything needs to change, they can change it from here and then either drag those tags out or have those changes reflect immediately. But just a little way to stay organized with the thing. But yeah, that's our that's our table. There's a lot more that could be done with this, but for the sake of the workshop, we have about 8 minutes left. So I'll try. What do you say, too? Should we try to make a tooltip or should we open it up for Q&A?
I kind of feel like it's up to everybody else. Does anybody have questions for Mark? Any questions is cool.
Mhm. I used to have a professor who would say, not everyone at once.
Yeah, I feel like I got some of the gist of it, but I feel that I need to rewatch it to get fully
For
all
sure.
and really get into it as well.
Yeah.
It might be good to kind of for you to do the tool tips if you feel like you can do it in 7 minutes, just for us to show to show us what's
Yeah.
possible.
Cool.
But
Go
yeah,
for it.
it's a
All right.
race against time.
Mm-hmm. So let me actually put a stroke around this so I know when I'm dragging things out. All right, so to build the tooltip, we have all of our components here, which is our body of the tooltip, the actual tip of the tooltip, which for now will only cover the bottom, the header text for it, and the body text. And there's more that we could do with like a multi-step tooltip, but for now, I'll keep it to just one step. What's going to be important here is making sure, again, that things are of the exact same width. So say we have our header text and our close button, which is way too big. Bring this down to 24, all in one line. What we'll want to do is group these. And within that group, let me draw a frame around these so I actually get constraints again. C4, C4, C4. All right, so within that group, what we'll then want to do is make sure that, again, we have our constraints right. So these two bits we want to align to the top. This body text, you want it to align to left, but top and bottom. So say that these are all grouped. that body text will not supposed to scale. Weird that it's scaling. Bring that out. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so actually, what we'll want is for this entire group to be left and right and to stick to the top. And then for this specifically, okay, no, sorry, I'll go back. So for the close button, we want it to be aligned to the right. For the header text, we want it to be aligned to the left. And we want both of them to constrain to the top, such that as this moves, to be a group within this, such that as this moves, the close button moves along with it. Now, ideally, this here would not scale when it does, but I think an auto layout would help. So let's throw this group into auto layout, have them both arranged as such, and then expand this to the ends of the body, right? And they have, how would you say, they have space between them set to make it 160, not 4,160, but 160. And since we want them to stay on either side of this, this frame, we'll do space between, right? And then dictate some gutters for them. So 20 on that side, or margins for them, and 20 on that side. We'll set this to, I was gonna say fill container, but it seems we have to do a little bit more first. So we're gonna shelf those for now, and then we'll create 3 different tips, just so that this doesn't block any potential text or anything that comes below it. We'll group them, and then within the group, we'll have this one as center and top. This one is right and top, and this one as left and top. Right, so as they move, they should not be scaling. They should be sticking to exactly where they are. But let's see. I think here just the same, actually. We'll set it to auto layout with space between, and then set margins such that they stay exactly where they should. So as the entirety of this scales, so do those tips. And they're also stuck to the top, right? For the body text, that will expand to about this, and should have pulled up a logarithm generator, but for now, we'll just deal with body text and actually have it as left, top, the text oriented that way as well. And let's see. Oh, we have just 1 minute. Oh, we're so close. From here, we'll do an auto layout on both. Have there be no gap between them. Causing some issues here because these tips have like this ghost space above them, but I'm convinced there's a way to fix that. And there it is. So hopefully this will start, to react the way that we want it, but oh, I'm sad that we're out of time. If anyone has questions about how to make this work further, I'm happy to answer them outside of this call. I'm happy to answer them on this call. Anything works for me.
No, thank you for walking us through that. It's amazing what Figma can do, isn't it? Or like with components and system. Um, I certainly learned some tricks today. But thanks everyone for staying on. Thank you, Mac, for sharing. It
Of
was
course.
good. It was a good interactive bit. It's what we do, right? As designer, we just try it out and do it until it works right. So
Very true.
good. But yeah,
Right.
thank you everyone for joining. We'll be sending out the recording so that you can watch it
Mhm.
afterwards and practice.
I'll
Mac, are
be
you
dropping the link as well.
awesome? Sounds good. Perfect.
All right.
Well, have a good rest of your day. Yeah.
Take care,
And
everyone. Thanks for coming.
thank you, Mac.
See you. Thanks.
Okay.